For Global Ethics Day 2018, Carnegie Council staff and affiliates discuss ethics in action.
I think in many ways, my profession of journalism hasn't seen greater ethical challenges in my lifetime as they do now. I think for a lot of us journalists, it's trying to find whether they view themselves as objective observers of fact and history, or whether they view themselves as activists. I think in this environment, there's such confusion over what truth is. And journalists need to be able to call out falsehoods without letting their own biases play in, and yet at the same time not be sort of morally relativist about clear rights and wrongs and clear ethics. They need to call out those falsehoods, but they have to do it in a way where they maintain their professional integrity. My personal ethical policy as a journalist is twofold. One, not to do unnecessary harm. I think journalists are competitive and they're looking for scoops just like anyone else, and our jobs essentially are to hold power to account. And I think in the process of doing that, we need to make sure not to do harm to individuals that don't deserve harm to be done on them. And I think that we as journalists have to realize that what we say has to be extremely precise. It needs to reflect accuracy as opposed to opinion, unless we're saying we're opinion journalists. And that's one part of my own personal policy as a journalist. My other personal ethical policy as a journalist is extreme radical self-awareness of my own biases. Journalists are human. We grew up in cultures with backgrounds that inform our own opinions. I always go into a story, if I happen to have an opinion on it, extremely aware of what that bias might be within me, and I try to correct for it. And I think the best journalists can do that, and I trust them to do so. And I think that's the most important thing in trying to regain the trust of the public in journalistic institutions, is just knowing that the best journalists are actually very aware of their biases, and they really do try earnestly to be fair. I think journalists every day they file a story have to make ethical decisions when it comes to their sources and who they source their stories to, when it comes to the stories they choose to tell, whether it be stories that benefit society or harm society or a community. I think they have to be ethical in their choice of language, and whether they're going to feed into polarities that exist in our current environment, or whether they're going to choose to be the objective, fair, accurate journalists that we all started out striving to be. I think where I see the greatest moral leadership is in the unsung local newspaper reporters. There are a lot of communities whose local papers have been devastated by digital media, and yet those underpaid, unsung heroes to me are the local journalists that continue to cover the city council meetings and local crimes and local government and local businesses, and are doing their jobs in a way that isn't gaining national attention and yet is so core to why journalism matters in a democracy.